I think the environment has to be changed.
What we're saying is have a heart.
We've got to be able to regenerate our
There'll be people who are kind, people who are cruel, but that's life. You can be passionate about pigeons. I'm fine with that.
Talking about this issue in schools, just to share an experience. For many years, I was with the National Committee for UNIFEM Singapore, and we always contacted schools to talk about trafficking. And a lot of schools actually have this fear of this subject. We get
Why? What
we get a lot. The schools that says yes and say yes, come to our schools and talk about trafficking are usually the more independent school. They're independent. They say, yeah, come talk to our.
So
student.
what are the fears
but
that the school has?
They're afraid, like, oh, could this be outside the OB markers? Because if you talk about trafficking, will be talking about human trafficking. You have to talk about what the state has done or not done. So there are times where the school have said yes, and then the school will call back to say, oh, sorry, we've changed our mind, you cannot come and talk. I've had experience where the ghost said yes, I'm standing there, and then the teacher said, oh, I thought you're talking about drugs trafficking. Can you change to drugs trafficking? I said, no, I'm talking about human trafficking.
So were you allowed to continue?
Well, because I'm already standing there, I said, there's no way, I'm going to continue, because if you say I'm not going to continue, I will tell the student to say that you have not allowed me to continue.
I'm all for inculcating a value system through the education system to educate younger people. But I've got a more fundamental question. What makes a prostitute? I mean, in Shuvei's example, we're talking about generational prostitution, extending through 3 generations. In those circumstances, I'm not entirely sure whether the 3rd generation daughter prostitute even is part of the school system. And even if she's part of the school system, is her filial or family exposure, which is 3 generational prostitution, where the father, the grandfather, and everybody has condoned it, where the mother has actually applied a sex trade for monies, as to whether she's even in a position to understand what's right and wrong, because she's grown up with it. Right, it's become an occupational thing, going through 3 generations. So under those circumstances, if she was part of the school system, I don't know how effective a program would be to inculcate values of not allowing your body to be exploited, whether by older customers or younger customers or any customers. It may just be seen and viewed by the young person as a given, as a reality that people survive on an occupation of this nature. So you have the difficulty there. The other thing is, I'm not entirely sure as to...
So how do you address that problem then, with those girls? What do you do?
I think in those circumstances, you'll have to necessarily have the state take responsibility, dredge that particular child out of those family circumstances, put her in a very neutral environment where you can actually get her to rethink what she's gone through. And that's going to be it's not going to be an easy experience, because it's going to be emotionally traumatizing, because whatever it is, she is attached to all those members of her family, and for the state to take her out, it's going to be a traumatic experience for her. But notwithstanding that, I think that's going to be a necessary evil compared to the kind of continued exposure she's going to get, because she's going to have children, and she's going to perpetrate that occupational thing through generations. And from that perspective, it's got to stop. The state has got to intervene and take responsibility, and I think in these circumstances, if I'm not mistaken, the state does.
I still believe education is very important, because most of in our center, most of the girls got influenced by friends when they were in the teenagers. So for them, they want to get quick money, and also don't need to work so hard, and even they already have committed crime. So they say, well, okay, if everybody do that, then why not?
From my personal experience, I've come across prostitutes who do it because they're trying to feed their drug addiction habit.
Yes.
Okay, and that's fairly common. There are prostitutes who become prostitutes because they've lost self-esteem as a result of coming from fractured families, where they've been abused by the fathers, uncles, their parents, and they have got no understanding of respecting family authority. They look at parents completely differently, and they've got very low self-esteem. Some of them become very vulnerable to the prostitution trade. There are also people who come from fractured families where there's no abuse, but there's just discord between their parents, as a result of which they become witness to discord in divorced kind of environments, and as a result of which they feel like they're isolated, and they start straying, and then they become vulnerable to other influences, like what Suresh mentioned, peer group pressure, where girls from other kind of backgrounds turn around and say it's okay to do this because now you're independent and you don't have to emotionally rely or financially rely on a fractured family kind of background. Okay, so what I'm basically, and then of course there are also, I'm sure, girls who come from affluent backgrounds, happy families, but who've got a penchant or a propensity for the high living. So they come from affluent backgrounds, but the affluent parents don't spoil them. So they want to be able to afford, ostentatious goods, and they think that this is the easy way out. And they can be highly intelligent teenagers, highly intelligent 18-year-olds who go into it with their eyes open, knowing exactly what kind of benefits they're going to get from on a monetary level.
How do you deal with that?
I think that the
education is going to help.
Education is one thing which I think is mandatory. You must. An education program, for it to work meaningfully, must also come with counseling services. That's also provided within the education program, which means that you have fairly adult counselors who are in a position to turn around and identify troubled kids.
So education encompasses more than imparting knowledge and values. It also imparts nurturing and caring.
Building pro-social behavior, pro-social skills, all of that is part of intervention, early intervention. If you have early intervention, you can break any cycle.
And identifying troubled kids, I think that's very, very
important. And the other question you mentioned about the drugs fix and all that, again, with intervention, early intervention, whether it's a fifth generation, it can still be broken. Any cycle can be broken.
You're very confident.
I just want to add on to the. I think you have raised a very good point, Suresh, that if the third generation, the girl is underage, I really think there is a legal process to take her out of the family. And I think we have an issue here, and I'm not talking about Tamara Village or whatever. We do know that we need a proper process for all shelters, for all counselors walking in the streets. There is already a discussion at the global level on consistency in approaches. There are clear indicators whether it's labor trafficking or sex trafficking. And especially if the girl is underage, third generation, I really think we need to put into effect the legal processes, which would include being sent to some kind of home and a lot of treatment. If that is not being done wherever such a situation is happening, I think we are not doing right by the girl in the case. That's the first thing I would like to put, and I support what Suresh has said. The second thing is this whole thing about education. Maybe we are in a box. We talk about education like education by the Ministry of Education. That's not what we are talking about.
That's not what we are talking about
here. This education, there are Australia, UK, Canada, these are the countries I know. I think there are many other places, and especially India, where they do fantastic work. There are such things as trauma counseling. There are grievance counseling, where it is very deep that you go into and you work with them. So it's a lot of cost. The state must be willing to spend money to send folks for training, to set up systems, like you said, very important, early intervention, where I see vulnerabilities, especially from the age of 12, 11, how can we intervene, how can we go in, what can we do? So I think this is very crucial. The third thing is with the young boys and the men. This story has really upset me. It's a 2-year-old story. A boy has turned 16 in one of our prestigious schools. Father sends him and his bunch of friends I cannot remember whether it was a condo or a cruise or whatever, and there were sex workers in there. So the initiation that the father gave the boy when he turned 16 was so old school. It was as old as the hills. You really got to be quite resolute to be able to say, no, I am not interested.
Yeah.
So we need to build up coping skills. Where's your value system? Yes, there are temptations all around you. Today we go to Bangkok. Wow, the things that they throw at you. So our whole tourism has changed to such an extent that that is also a problem. I've heard from friends that taxi drivers in Singapore will ask, where do you want to go? Which kind of girl do you want to have sex with? Which lorong shall I send you to? Because the lorongs have got different nationality.
Yes.
If I'm not sounding alarmist, but I think we have sat on this problem a little bit too long.